Alright, so now I'm talking about the loop of Henle, and it has a lot of similarities as the proximal tubule for regulation, but we're going to start with what comes out and what comes in it. So you have on the descending part of the loop of Henle right here, you have passive reabsorption of water, and this is called the concentrating segment because it's losing water and the solutes are staying in the tube, so it's very concentrated. And then on the ascending part, you have passive reabsorption of sodium chloride. So this is known as the diluting segment because it is rebalancing. And so these two sides here work together to make gradients so that they can have passive reabsorption. And then when you go up the loop of Henle to the thick ascending part, you also have other things being reabsorbed actively. So sodium chloride is actively reabsorbed up here, along with potassium, calcium, and magnesium. You'd have reabsorption of bicarb and excretion or secretion of hydrogen ions from the blood. You also have a passive cation reabsorption called the potassium backleak. So the K backleak and cation, so it's a lot of the K sounds together. The K backleak cation, it's passive reabsorption in the thick ascending loop. So like I said, it has similarities to the proximal tubule with regulation. It has sympathetic regulation, so you'd have increased sodium reabsorption by the alpha-1 receptors and increased renin by the beta-1 receptors. Angiotensin II affects this as well and increases the transporters, same as in the proximal, the sodium potassium ATPase, the sodium hydrogen exchanger, and the sodium bicarb cotransporter. It's also affected by glomerular tubular balance, which we already talked about. So it's important to note that the main transporters here are the NKCC2 and the sodium K ATPase. And the NKCC2 is on the apical membrane, so it's on the inside of the tube. And then the sodium potassium ATPase is on the basolateral membrane, so it's on the outside of the tube. And those are the two main transporters on the thick ascending loop. The clinical significance of the loop of Henle is that this is obviously the part of the kidney that's affected by loop diuretics. And specifically, loop diuretics affect the NKCC2 transporter on the apical membrane of the thick ascending loop of Henle. And a little memory mnemonic that I use for remembering things about loop diuretics is I draw an ear, kind of loopy, because it's a loop diuretic for the loop of Henle. And it's in the shape of an ear because loop diuretics tend to have ototoxicity. And you can see the canal going into the ear looks kind of like a mine shaft, and that's because the suffix of loop diuretics are "mide." And so for me, I remember mide, mine go together. And also there's a nick on the bottom of the ear where you'd have your ear pierced, so there's a little nick there signifying the NKCC2 transporter that's in the loop of Henle, apical membrane of the thick ascending loop. So that's why I have a little nick on the bottom of my ear to remember what the loop diuretics are actually affecting. So we've talked about how it works in general, and now we'll talk about when it goes wrong. And just to drive home the point of how important that transporter NKCC2 is on the apical membrane affected by loop diuretics, but also if it is mutated and inactivated, it leads to Bartter syndrome, and that's the loop of Henle disorder that we're talking about. So it's caused by an inactivating gene of the NKCC2 transporter on the apical membrane of the thick ascending loop. And so if it's inactivated, you're going to have decreased sodium chloride and potassium and reabsorption. So it's going to lead to secondary aldosteronism and hyponatremia, hypokalemia, obviously, and metabolic alkalosis.